Hello, everyone. Welcome to 10 Forward NB Geeks Let's Talk. I am one of your co-hosts, NB Geek. We are going to talk today about the man, the myth, the legend, the icon, the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock. But before we start talking about that, I need to introduce my other co hosts here. I want to introduce you to the man who makes Twitter trolls cry and mops the floors with her tears, Jack Bears.
It's showtime.
Here's
And also joining us is a woman who has class. She has intelligence. She has sass. She is what we geeks call a strong woman. And unlike you SJW motherfuckers out there, we like strong women. We love strong women. We love intellectual women. And she also has a hell of a set of letters. Alyssa A.V. P! I've really been trying to work on that for you because I wanted to give you a good intro. All right, guys, we're talking about, we've done Universal Horror, we've done silent films, we've done the evolution, but now we're getting into, I said Alyssa. Miss Watchtower, I said Alyssa.
Chloe.
Pretty sure I said Alyssa.
Name. That's the way he says my name.
If I said it wrong, I'm sorry. I don't exactly say words the right way sometimes.
Look,
I say Maryland. I say my home state is Illinois. I say all kinds of crazy shit. But anyway, we are going to talk about for the next hour from 3 to 4 my time, Eastern Daylight Time. We're going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, the icon, Alfred Hitchcock. Now, here's the thing, Jack, I'm going to let you take over in just a second. I just kind of want to say my thing about Alfred Hitchcock. I love psychological thrillers. Absolutely love them. I love a movie that has me on the edge of my seat or a show that has me on the edge of my seat. And Rod Serling could do that with Twilight Zone. Alfred Hitchcock could do that with what he was making. And he just could keep you on the edge of your seat. He, was just brilliant in his ability to make a suspenseful movie. And this is the thing, people mistake him, in my opinion, for sometimes horror in some ways, like with Psycho and Birds. And I was like, no, that's not horror. Those are psychological thrillers. They are. And then when I watched a few of hey, PCAT, how you doing? PCAT, great to have you on, buddy.
Hello,
PCAT. Hi to everybody.
Hey, PCAT. Welcome back.
And hey, everybody else.
Hey, Chloe.
And
Everybody.
Mrs. Watchtower, how are you doing today? I don't know you, but you're welcome to be on here and have a good time. One of the things about Alfred Hitchcock was I love suspense. They call him the master of suspense. I don't think that name does him justice. I think he should have been named the master of psychological thrillers because the man just knew how to really engage in the mind of people. He understood a way to really engage with an audience with what he did. And it was just fan-freaking-tastic. I mean, sorry. He also knew how to, when he had a twist, he knew how to take that twist at the right moment. But he didn't do a twist every time. He didn't do that every time. He didn't have as best I can tell, a single formula. He had formulas for the movies he was doing because he did comedy, he did a little bit of action, but his suspense, and he didn't always do a twist ending with his suspenses. Birds didn't have a twist ending, whereas Psycho did. But he knew how to really balance that. The man was a freaking genius. And it's something sorely lacking in Hollywood now. And I liked how I saw some of his trailers I was watching, and I was listening to him, and it's just Alfred Hitchcock really doing most of the trailer, and then just a little bit of the movie. And it's just he really knew how to play with somebody's mind. And that's where I'm gonna go. I'm gonna end off there. Jack, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts about Hitchcock, I agree. Like, you know, I definitely agree. He was a master of suspense. He was one of these rare directors who got it right, um, and he got it right constantly. Uh, at least after a certain point. His earlier stuff was touch and go. He did have a lot of movies that bombed,
Mhm.
stuff like that. But by by the mid 1950s, before even that, he was he was a he was a worldwide celebrity. He was a celebrity in the United States. He was a celebrity in England. He was a celebrity in Germany. Um, everybody knew his work. And then when he found his niche, when he found his niche and he stuck with it, he became the master of. That's why they call him master of suspense. I mean, and you're right, he had formulas that he would experiment with, and sometimes he'd make, he'd feel like he made a mistake, and he'd learn from that mistake, and that's how his movies got better and better. So, but anyways,
I
so
would,
his so like
yeah, Jack, I would
go ahead.
agree with you on that. Is as far as his movies, you have your. This is a man who learned from his movies and learned from his craft and learned where his niche was and learned where his audience was. And once he realized that, and yeah, maybe it took 20 years, but still, he learned where. And once he got to that point, we have Alfred Hitchcock. We have awards named after this guy, the Alfred Hitchcock Award. This man was just, when he finally got his stride, he was just a fucking genius.
Mhm.
Please continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
it's fine. So I mean, to get into his history, so he was born in 1899. He was born in East London to a very strict Roman Catholic family. Um, in 1905, when he was 6, his dad actually sent him to the police station with a note, and the policeman looked at the note, took little Alfred, and locked him up in a cell, and told him, "This is what we do with little boys who are naughty." And it gave, like, he remembered this in an interview, like, late in his life before he died. He remembered this, and he was like, that gave me a fear. That was the first time I really felt fear, and I felt the fear and ever since then I've had a fear of authority, and I've had a fear of police, or something like that. That's like a story he put out long, like, you know
Mhm.
that he
As
remembered he remembered long ago, from long ago, like that hit him.
Yeah, traumatize him. Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. You guys don't really know this about me, but I've been arrested several times. Actually, I think the total number was 7.
Fun.
And you trust me, getting those handcuffs put on is bad.
Hmm.
The worst part after that is being put in the slab.
Right. Well,
It
so I
was
mean, yeah, that really traumatized him, obviously. But I think he used that later on in his that idea of fear later on in his movies. Um,
Hmm.
he got into, like, when he grew up, he got into, like, the way he got into the movie industry. First, he got into creative writing. So in 1909, he became like a founding editor of something called the Haley Telegraph, and in that he would submit his short stories. And he actually once told somebody that that was his first step towards cinema, because by then he had also fallen in love with movies from like Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith, and he wanted a piece of that. He wanted to get into that. Uh, so while he was doing that, he had learned that Paramount was actually opening a studio in London. So what he did was he produced some title cards, because remember, this is the silent era. So he produced some title cards for them, and he sent it in, and they looked at it and they were like, "Okay, you're hired." That's how easy it was to get into the movie business back then.
Wow.
It was that easy. He made
now,
up
if I'm
some
not
title
mistaken,
cards.
he has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of
Hmm.
Fame. If I'm not mistaken.
He does.
Yeah, yeah, he
He's the one that
does.
he's the one that I know that has two that I know of. I'll double check to be
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I was looking that up when I was doing the research. But okay, continue, Jack.
Okay, so the studio didn't stay there for long. They pulled out in 1922, and so after they pulled out, he was hired by Gainsborough Pictures to be an assistant director, and that's where he started, like co-directing movies. But he was, at the time, he wasn't really credited for. But it was Woman to Woman from 1923, The White Shadow 1924, The Blackguard 1925, and then also 1925 he was asked to direct The Pleasure Garden, which was in Munich. So he had to fly to Germany to do that. While
Right.
he was there, he also directed The Mountain Eagle, which is a film that's now lost. But Hitchcock remembers that movie, and he described it as a very bad movie. I'm always gonna. That's my Hitchcock impersonation, right there. A very bad movie.
Hey,
So
that was a thing back then. When they made a movie that sucked, they owned up to it. Unlike
yes, I,
now,
I
where
agree,
they just
Yes.
blame us, the fans, because we don't get the
because they don't
movie.
they don't want to blame themselves for making shit. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
The fact that they
exactly.
bombed and nobody loved it.
It's like you. What's
Yeah.
your problem with my movie? Your movie sucked. We didn't like it.
Hmm.
Well, what's your problem? Well, how about what's your goddamn problem?
Right.
Right. You
Exactly.
have zero creativity.
So he did get married. He married a woman named Amma. I'm not sure if I could. Reville,
Let me check and see.
Reville or Revile.
Ravella, I
I don't know
think.
if it's Revile, because that,
Alma
yeah, Revella,
Revilla.
maybe
It's
something like that. So he married
probably
married her in
Alma Revilla.
1926.
They were married
Yeah,
in 1926 until her death in 1980.
yeah, and a couple years later, in 1928, they had a daughter, Patricia Alma Hitchcock,
Yep,
which became their only kid.
correct.
Um, and In 1927 is when the Jazz Singer came out, and that's when the first sound thing came out. By 1929, um, he was producing something called Blackmail with a company called British International Pictures, and he had filmed about half of the movie when they came up to him and says, "Oh, we want this in sound." So he had to go back and reshoot everything with sound and everything. That's also where he started using his, like, very famous landmarks as backdrops. That's the first movie he started to do that in, and it's also the first movie he cameoed in. But his back was to the camera. So, but yeah, so that was the first time he actually cameoed him, and it wasn't because he was like, "I want to be in the movie." It was because they didn't have, so so he volunteered. Um, so in 1933, he signs up with Gaumont British Film Company, and he films The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1934. And in 1935, he does 39 Steps, which is actually where they first introduce the MacGuffin, the idea of the MacGuffin, which is like
Yeah,
something
the
that,
MacGuffin.
yeah. So that's the first movie he utilizes that in. And in that one, the MacGuffin is a stolen set of plans. 1996, he does something called Sabotage, and the Sabotage movie is what it is. It's a movie where there's a bomb in a bus, and nobody knows that there's a bomb in a bus
Hmm.
except for the audience. And
Oh.
this is where Hitchcock actually in a 1972 interview with Masters of Cinema, he actually explained his like idea of suspense for that movie. It was, if you put a bomb in a movie, tell the audience, because after that they're going to be on the edge of their seats until that bomb explodes. It's not the explosion that that's going to terrorize people, it's that anticipation of the explosion. So
Yeah, that is something about Alfred Hitchcock. He really understood human nature
mhm,
and how we were going to react to things. You take Psycho, you take Birds, I mean, once that man found his stride and he understood the human condition, he just made some of the best fucking movies
oh yeah,
ever. The
oh yeah.
best suspenseful movies.
But I mean,
Please
at this,
continue.
but at this point, he was still kind of learning, because he also in his mind thought that he made a mistake when he actually blew up the bomb, because while you're sitting there, in suspense waiting for this bomb to blow up, they show you the people in the bus, and it includes like this little boy. So when the bus blows up, everybody in the bus dies, and he realized real quickly that the audience would turn on him after that. Like they turn on the movie after that. They didn't like it after that because they didn't want to see the kids get blown up. So he learned, like he later on said, if he could go back and redo that movie, he would do it exactly the way he did it, except the bomb would never have gone off,
Oh.
which I think would have been a lot more psychologically like you know like for the audience, you know what I mean?
But think about this. This is a time when these directors, these writers and stuff would watch their own movies and admit, okay, I made an error. If I could go back and do this. Nowadays, what is the problem? It's not the directors, it's not the writers, it's us, the
Right,
audience. We're the fucking problem. We're the reason why it's like, well, this movie wasn't made for you. You don't understand it. It's like, well, no shit, I don't understand it because it doesn't make a goddamn bit of sense. Did you? Well, it wasn't made for you. Well, then who the fuck was the goddamn movie made for?
right, yeah. And he also,
Whereas when like people like Hitchcock and stuff would be like, okay, I had a screw up, I made a mistake, I made a good movie, but there was a part in there that if I could go back and change it, I would. That is nothing wrong with admitting, hey, I gave it my best, but hindsight's 2020. I would rather have gone and done it a little bit different this time. Sorry, I can't change that, but at least they admitted, they owned up to it and said, yeah, I could have done something a little better.
right, and nowadays that's kind of lost on everyone. But
Unfortunately.
Hitchcock was all, like as I've said before, he's kind of a funny guy. He's always had this dry British humor, but it was for the idea for like for a guy who does the movies that he does, I felt like it was the most appropriate type of humor. Um, so one of the things he would do is he hosted a dinner party where all the food was dyed blue. He dyed all the food in the dinner blue,
Yes.
and his reasoning behind it was he thought there was not enough blue foods in the world.
Yes.
You know, that type of humor.
Yep.
And then so like in 1937 he comes out with Young and Innocent. 1938 The Lady Vanishes. He comes out with The Lady Vanishes. And that one he was awarded the 1938 New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Director. So now he's starting to win awards.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, this is new. He hasn't even gone to the United States yet. He's winning awards in New York. So when he flies to New York, he realizes that he's already a celebrity because he sees his face on magazines and newspapers and stuff like that. And he realizes, oh, like everybody likes him there. While he was there, he was persuaded by a studio head named Selznick. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Selznick, to actually come to Hollywood to make movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hitchcock was eventually persuaded, and he went down to Hollywood in 1940, where he directed his first movie, Rebecca. And there's a reason why I say it like that, but
Yes.
Rebecca. But so while he was making Rebecca, him and Selznick started having like a difficult working relationship because Hitchcock would keep getting notes from Selznick, and Hitchcock wanted to be left alone basically, and he eventually got his way because Selznick ended up becoming so busy with making Gone with the Wind that he basically left Hitchcock alone to finish the movie, and then it won the Oscar for Best Picture, which actually Selznick took the Selznick, after all those notes he tried to change stuff with, like he took the Oscar for that one, and Hitchcock was nominated for Best Director.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think he ever won a Best Director.
No, he was he was nominated 4 times, but he was never. Yeah,
5 times.
Yeah,
5 times. Sorry,
which is a fucking tragedy.
Yeah,
He also worked on Gone with the Wind too. I was going to point that out too, Jack. That he also did some made some suggestions for Gone with the Wind, but they never made the final cut.
Of course, yeah, because they were feuding. But yeah, so like they respected each other enough to where like they would work with each other, but they really had a difficult working relationship. In fact, Selznick didn't have enough projects for Hitchcock, so he started lending him out to other studios.
Really?
Yeah, he started lending him out to studios, and
for those of you who don't know, this was a time when you were contracted to a film studio, you were contracted to that studio. You couldn't just go from that studio to another studio without permission.
Or risk lawsuits.
This was a certain time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, but he was nice enough to where he actually was like Alfred would be like, "Can I work on this movie?" He'd be like, "Go ahead." So yeah, so like in 1941, he did Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which I didn't know was a movie before the current Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but now I know.
Yeah, actually, I just saw that, and I'm like, I want to watch the Alfred Hitchcock one.
I think I'm eventually.
I didn't know about it, but I'm like, I
too.
want to watch the Alfred Hitchcock because I guarantee it's better
Yes.
than. I gotta believe it's better than Angelina Jolie, which
Right.
I'm gonna be the first one. You know, most people don't agree with me. I think she is ugly as hell.
Okay, well,
I don't find her attractive at all.
but anyways,
I don't.
that's fine. But anyways, like so, 1942, he comes out with a movie called Saboteur, which is not to be confused with the 1936 movie Sabotage with the blown up bus, but it was Hitchcock's first film that he made for Universal Studios.
Correct.
And this one featured a guy falling from the Statue of Liberty. And now, when I used to go to Universal Studios as a kid, thank you, childhood. One of the things, there was like a special effects show that you can go to, or you learn how they make these things. They had a version for Back to the Future, but they also had a version for this movie too. And when you walk in, the first thing you see is this large, like I guess it's full size or almost full size Statue of Liberty hand with the torch, and there's a blue screen on the bottom. and there's a camera attached to the statue, and the statue, the hand, there's a pulley so where it can lift, it can go up. So like, you have a volunteer. I volunteered once, and you sit there and you put your hands up on the statue as if you're holding on to it, and you're just standing there, right? And then suddenly they see you on the screen, and they put like the blue screen, they change that to like looking down toward the bottom of the statue,
Mm-hmm.
and so it looks like you're hanging from the
Oh.
top of the Statue of Liberty, right? And then what happens is they pull they pull the hand up. The entire hand goes up with the camera attached, and then you're supposed to go ah, and it makes it it makes it look like you're falling.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how they do it. And because I decided to talk about it because I actually got to do that once.
Cool.
So this is the year that this was the year that Hitchcock's mother died in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
She died of illness. The next year, Hitchcock's brother died of an overdose, and he started to feel kind of mortal, I would say. And he was overweight, of course, and so he made a New Year's resolution to take his diet seriously, and and with the help of a doctor and stuff like that. So he was about 300 pounds, and his goal was to be 200 pounds. He did try to apply for life insurance after he had lost some weight, but he was still denied. And his weight would fluctuate for the rest of his life. Like it would go up and down until for the rest of his life. Like he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
He would try to take it seriously because before he had a big meal. Like he had a huge meal, and now it was much smaller. But I'm pretty sure he missed some of that. So in 1944, he does something with 20th Century Fox called U-Boat, and he got John Steinbeck to help with this movie.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Steinbeck didn't like the finished product, and he tried to get his name removed from the credits, but he couldn't.
Correct.
Either way, this was the second time that Hitchcock was nominated for a director Oscar.
It's always funny when the actors don't respect the director. I mean, when you look at, Alfred Hitchcock, he really, once he got his niche in tow, he just became a master and a genius. And unfortunately, one thing that you don't always see sometimes is the brilliance. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always live to see the fruits of their labor.
Well, so all that, the entire time that we were talking about the 40s, the war was going on in the background. He actually did a couple of propaganda films for Britain at one point, but then in 1945, after Germany fell, Hitchcock became the treatment advisor on a documentary called German Concentration Camps Factual Survey. And it captured the liberation of the Nazi concentration camps. The idea was to put this documentary together and show the German, show it on German television, show the German people just how bad the Nazi regime was. But what happened was it was so graphic and traumatic that they decided not to air it, and it was given to a British museum, and it was unreleased until 1985.
Mm.
One of the things you have to realize is, censoring was so bad even back then.
Well, I mean,
And
this was
for
graphic.
Germany to want to,
These were bodies stacked
even-
upon. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they couldn't handle that. They were like, no.
Yeah.
You got to look at it. I mean, I hate to say it, but most Germans, even under the Nazi regime, had no damn clue what was going on.
Right.
They did
Right.
not know. Yeah, they may not have liked Jewish people, but they would, if they had known what was going on, they probably would have turned. But that was, unfortunately, that's how technology works. There was no CNN, there was no 24/7 news, there was no, you know, um, drones going over flying places showing these concentration camps. They just, most Americans didn't even, most of the world didn't even know these existed.
Yeah. So yeah, so like after the war and everything, actually, what happened was there was another movie that he was working on during the war, and then after it came out after the war, called Notorious.
Mhm.
So now the MacGuffin in this film was uranium that was hidden in wine bottles, and this briefly got him in trouble with the FBI because the year before, this was before like the bombs went off in Japan. He went and consulted with an institution over the development of a uranium bomb, but he did it for research for this movie. And so this was before Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened. So they were monitored by the FBI for months. Um, but with a budget of $2 million, it grossed over $9 million. So it was considered a success.
Oh
Um,
yeah, at that time, yeah, you take a $2 million budget, which would be exorbitant. I actually pulled up a calculator and it did a conversion, and if we did that conversion, we could put what it would be now versus what its profits were. And usually, when you do that, like you said, it's a $2 million budget on a movie that made over $9 million. And one of the things we have to remember is most of these movies were not seen outside of the U.S.
Mhm.
mhm,
They were only in, and most of us at that time, TV was very new or non-existent at the time. Most people, when they were listening to things, they were listening to radio. But for the most part, that movies were where you saw film, where you saw TV, for lack of a better term.
mhm. Well, anyways, um, Hitchcock's last movie with Selznick that he was contracted for was called the Paradigm, and he did that one in 1947. And so the following year, now that he was away from Selznick, he and a friend formed something called Transatlantic Pictures.
Right.
Warner Brothers would distribute their films, and he would basically become an independent filmmaker for the next few years.
Yeah.
He did a movie called Rope with James Stewart. It was his first Technicolor film. Uh, he did another
Jimmy
movie.
Stewart.
Yeah. And he
Mhm.
did another movie called Under Capricorn, which was done in England, but it was in some parts of that were Technicolor. So he starting to work with color in a little bit in these. Um, in the Under Capricorn, Ingrid Bergman starred in it, and he had disagreements with Hitchcock over the long takes, and so Hitchcock was finally like, Ingrid, it's only a movie, and in the end, the movie bombed, and it screwed up it screwed up his deal with Transatlantic. Like Transatlantic Pictures went under after that, and that experience changed his view on actors. He was not a fan of uh, 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 he wasn't a fan of he started calling them cattle and stuff like that, making jokes about that. And let's see, I'm trying to see. Oh, and then of course, 1954, he did Dial M for Murder.
Mhm.
Uh, this is where in this one he experimented with 3D cinematography, and he did so because the studios were trying to compete with televisions in some way, because television was starting to take over their marketing, their audience, and stuff like that. Um, let's see. Oh, Rear Window he did that same year as well. It starred Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart,
Yes.
um, and he was nominated for Best Director again in that one.
Mhm.
Um,
I still don't understand how he didn't win a Best Actor.
I know.
Or, sorry,
Best
Best Director. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I meant, Best Director.
Yeah, he became
Yeah,
a U.S. I was going to say he became a U.S. citizen in 1955. And in 1955, he also did he started with Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and from there, I think I should pass the torch.
Here
So,
you go, Alyssa. It's your turn.
yep, on me. So that caricature that we see in that Alfred Hitchcock Presents is actually drawn by Hitchcock himself. And that series ran from 1955 to 1965. So that was known. Each episode is about 25 to maybe 30 minutes long each. So 10 whole years, we get a whole bunch of Hitchcock in that. Also, during that same time, we also had the first Oscar win for one of the songs in one of his films, Que Sera Sera, which is well known by Doris Day. That won an Oscar in 1956. Let's see. There's another thing that with his practical joke into that's a little less known fact is that he actually dressed up in drag at one point, and that footage claimed to have been in his office somewhere, but after Hitchcock's death, no one really knows what happened to that footage. So if there's footage up there of Hitchcock in drag, who knows where the heck it is?
It's lost. I lost
It
it.
probably got burned.
I lost it in the bathroom.
Yes. But he was also good friends.
That's one of the things I always loved about Alfred Hitchcock was his voice.
Yes.
He just had such an incredible voice.
Good evening.
It just, you wanted to listen to the guy. Hello,
Listen to
I'm
him
Alfred
right away,
Hitchcock.
too.
Yeah, I was watching a couple of the trailers, and I was like, this guy understood how to do a trailer. He was like, I want you to see this movie about the birds. And, he's sitting there, he's talking, and then he's about to eat a turkey, and he's like, I will eat this later. And I'm watching this, I'm like, this guy is brilliant. You're not even seeing the goddamn movie, and you're already like, holy hell. And then the last little part of the movie is about the birds.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, please continue, Alyssa.
So another cool thing about Hitchcock too was he was also good friends with Albert R. Broccoli, the guy who was in charge of the James Bond films. So that's kind of cool when you think about that. Hitchcock had this friendship with someone that's known for another franchise, that they're both known for something iconic. One's known for their cinema films and one's known for their spy thrillers. But the thing is, I'm going to get to that a little bit later on, but Hitchcock did, one of his last film projects that he was going to work on was actually a spy thriller, but it never really made it big, unfortunately. It just basically, it stayed a screenplay, but it never actually got filmed in his latter life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So we all know that he did his film Psycho and a lot of those other iconic films during those 50s, 60s-ish. He also delivered the shortest speech ever in one of these award ceremonies in 1967 at the Oscars for the, let me see, what was the name of it? The Albert Memorial Award. He just simply said the words, "Thank you." That's all he says. He gave the shortest speech ever.
Thank you. By the way, with that Psycho thing, just real quick, there's like I mentioned before, there's a commercial that he did, like a promotional thing that he did where he tours the set. First he tours the outside set. You see the Bates Motel, and then you see the Psycho house, the exterior, and then he goes inside, and it's of course like now it's in the studio or whatever, but he goes into a couple of rooms. At one point, he opens a door, he stops, looks and stops, closes the door. You don't see what's in there, and he just looks at you and says, "Bathroom," right? He goes up, that's where he goes, and he goes to the stairs, and he's trying to explain, this is where the murder occurred. And he's starting to like explain how like when his back hit the floor, it cracked and was so twisted, and let's go upstairs. And then he goes upstairs. And then he goes into a door and he looks at this, the bathroom. And he opens the door. And then he opens the curtain, and then that does the wee, and then that's the Psycho. But I loved how he did it. I loved his humor. Anyways,
it was a funny thing. he didn't come off as funny. He
No.
would always be so serious and so direct with the audience. I mean,
Yes.
you look at his stuff
He was
and
very
he was
dry, yeah.
like, "Good evening,
Yes.
I'm Alfred Hitchcock." And yes, he had a very dry sense, but
He
he
did.
somehow knew how to take that dry sense and just make it magical.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, my favorite movie, and I'm just going to say that there is, besides Psycho, but that's my second favorite, The Birds. The Birds is
Yes.
absolutely my most favorite movie of Alfred Hitchcock. Absolutely my favorite. He took a concept that, even back then, when I watched it in the 80s, and it was made way before that, it just stuck with me. And I was like, this is so freaking cool. And my grandmother was with me watching these movies a lot of times that she had seen before, and she would explain to me. And my grandmother used to go to bed at night because she was an insomniac, because she worked night shift at the hospital, because she was an RN. And you know what she was reading almost every night? Alfred Hitchcock books.
Ooh, okay.
She
Nice.
was just, she between Alfred Hitchcock and William Shatner, I don't know which one she loved more. But I think I'm going to put the edge on Alfred Hitchcock.
Probably, yes. To answer your question, PCAT, no, he was not considered to direct a Bond movie. No. You asked, no, he didn't consider him to direct it. It was just a friendship. That's all it was, basically. Another cool thing about Hitchcock that you may not know is now Hitchcock is typically a British guy. He loves his tea, he loves his whatever. But the thing is, most people think, okay, I'm going to set my cup down. I'm done with it. No. This is what Hitchcock would do. He would take his cup wherever it was in the saucer and just throw it over his shoulder, and it would break. And so wherever the pieces were, they would just be all over the floor afterwards. Like,
no way.
Yes. So
also, at one point, didn't a young Steven Spielberg sneak into one of his sets?
yes, he did. Yes, he did.
What about that? What movie was that one?
I don't remember which one
Jack,
it was.
let Alyssa do her time.
He's fine.
She's obviously got a lot of things she wants to bring up.
But here's another thing too, that another iconic movie where his voice, he wasn't in the movie now. Going back to the Universal thing, his voice is actually the voice of Jaws in the Universal Studios on the ride. So if you ever hear Jaws talk or Bruce talk, that's actually Alfred Hitchcock's voice. That's not anyone else but Hitchcock himself. But he considered there were certain noises that he considered that were the most frightening to get people into suspense, to get their heart pounded, was kind of thing. So it was like a police patrol car, crash of a road accident, crackling of a burning forest, galloping horses, howling dogs, a scream of a stabbed woman, and steps of a lame person walking in the dark. So he considered those are the most scariest sounds in the whole wide world. And I think he tried to include those. And he thought, you know what? Let me make my films one titles mostly. And that's one reason why he made a lot of his films with only one title, with one word. Because he said, you know what? That's going to stick with the audience a little bit more than a more wordier one. So that's why you would see a lot more stuff with only one title. Psycho, Vertigo. And then he would do stuff like that. So that was the kind of cool thing about it. He also has some very crazy fears. One of his fears was, as we mentioned earlier, was the police. But he also has some phobias for runny egg yolks. He was scared to death of that. He never tried to include that. He also did not like deli meat sandwiches and cheese. That he absolutely would freak out about. He was like, no. He also couldn't stand when a woman was pregnant because that was one reason I think he only had one child. That just freaked him out. Like, nope, nope. She just her whole
He had
life.
he had a quote. He had offered he had offered Vera Miles the lead role for Vertigo.
Yes.
He said, I was offering her a big part, a chance to become a beautiful, sophisticated blonde, a real actress.
Yes.
We'd have spent a heap of dollars on it, and she had the bad taste to get pregnant. I hate pregnant women
Yes.
because they have children.
Yes. Yes, he did. But one cool thing about Hitchcock too that I found out, which was kind of crazy, Hitchcock actually wanted to film on Disney, on the Disney lot and all that kind of stuff. But because he had made
Disneyland.
Psycho, Disney said, no, no, absolutely not. You cannot go in my studios no matter what, because he says, Psycho, no, 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 no. You're the person that created Psycho. No, you can't come to my studios, whatever. One thing that's kind of interesting from his 1940s era that Jack left out was he actually planned on creating, at that time, was a modern day version of Hamlet that would take place in England, of all places. And it was going to star Cary Grant as the lead character. So that
Really?
so yeah. And now everybody thinks he was in every single one of his films. He was in appeared but all but 18 of his films. So if you're looking at certain films, you will not find him. He's in most of them. Yes, that's me, Dath Haster. That's me. So he also passed on the opportunity to direct Rosemary's Baby. He had a chance to do that. He says, nope, that's not me. And his wife and his daughter appeared in 3 of the films with him. So yeah, 3 of his films, he's with his wife and his daughter. Sadly, his wife was in poor health, and so some of his films a little bit struggled with that because she was having strokes, and Hitchcock was a little bit concerned about her, saying, so he would back away from it. But his own health started failing too, toward the end of his last life in 1967-ish. So he moved to working on other projects with a little lesser role, where he didn't focus more on it. So Torn Curtain, and basically it ended his career collaboration where he was working with this well-known iconic composer. What was his name? Okay, Bernard Herrmann. And so he replaced him with Jay Livingston and Roy Evans. So basically that film basically ended the collaboration that he had done for 12 years with these iconic composer, but because of his wife's poor health, he says, you know what, I don't want this guy anymore. No, he's like, no. And he returned in 1972 to return to Britain to film one more film in England. He hadn't done one since the 30s and everything like that. So he filmed the movie Frenzy. Now that film is actually where he first started his film nudity. He actually broke the trend and said, okay, I'm going to start using nudity in films because of this. And so that was the one that started it all. And he also wrote the film Frenzy based on a novel that was called Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Lassiter, Saussure. And his last film was made in 1976 called Family Plot. And the thing is, he had done a little bit teasing off and on with the censors and all that kind of stuff off and on. But the thing is, they were sort of like saying, well, Hitchcock found a subtle way to introduce the nudity or get past the censorship. And so he found that way to balance it out where people didn't realize that it was being censored without it. But yeah, he was in pretty poor health, unfortunately, toward his latter life. And let's see, what did I write? So yeah, toward the end of his life, he was working on the script. Like I said, he was working on a spy thriller that was going to be Short Night, but it was never filmed. His wife had a stroke and he was worried about her. So the screenplay, if you guys ever want to read it, is in a book called The Last Days of Alfred Hitchcock by David Freeman that was released in 1999. So basically that's where the screenplay is for that whole story. So if you want to find out, so yes, it's all in there. In 1962, he refused to receive a British Order Award, but his poor health prevented him from doing that kind of stuff, and his wife as well. But in 1980, he finally accepted the offer to become a knight in that era. And so, unfortunately, they didn't have the big fancy ceremony and everything like that. And so, all they did was basically get a whole bunch of paperwork together, sign the papers at Universal Studios, of all places. And so, they basically had like a luncheon and everything like that. He signs the papers, and then he's officially a knight. His last public appearance was on March 16th, 1980, where he was introduced as the 1981's winner of American's Film Institute Award. Sadly, Hitchcock died of kidney failure a month later on March 29th in his Bel Air home. His funeral was held the next day, and then his body was cremated, and then his body was scattered, with the remains were scattered over the Pacific Ocean on May 10th, 1980. So some of the awards that Hitchcock won was he was on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which we mentioned earlier, for his films and also television. So he won for both of those. He also won 2 Golden Globe Awards, 8 Laurel Awards, and 5 Lifetime Achievement Awards. So this guy had quite a career. I mean, I always think about his films, and I also think about these books, the 3 investigator books. Basically, it's sort of like the Hardy Boys, and they would solve these mysteries. And a lot of times, Hitchcock would be in these books. He had a small little cameo in these books where he would show up and he would tell these kids from, I think they were the 40s and 50-ish, but basically they would talk to Hitchcock, and he'd say, "Oh, how did you solve this mystery?" and everything like that. They say, "Oh, this is how we solved it." And Hitchcock would eventually so-called incorporate it into a future film kind of thing. So we all know he did all these iconic films. Did he actually have a favorite?
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. I need to answer this real quick.
Yes.
That Nigel movie guy. I know more about movies. I care more about movies. I'm classically educated, unlike everyone here, which qualifies me to be a YouTuber talking about movies. No, Nigel, sorry, that does not give you the right to disagree with us. You're free to disagree with us, but you don't get to come in here and say you know more than us, because that's bullshit. Don't come on my panel and say you know more than me without being able to back it up. Because I've got 2 people here right now who are amazing experts on film history. That's why I have them on here. You know, you wanna talk like that? That's fine. But you are not going to sit here and say you know more about shit than the rest of us. Because what we're talking about, I've got 2 people who understand stuff way better than I do. Don't come on my fucking channel and pull that kind of shit, because I will back my co-hosts up every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And guess what? It's fucking Sunday. Enough said. Asshole. I don't like that. Look, we can all have difference we can all have difference of opinion.
Sure.
But I don't like that kind of shit.
No, me neither. There's the door.
And I know about more about movies. I know more about what? Gremlins, fucking Back to the Future, Die Hard. You know, do you really want to go into those areas of what we know more? The whole point of why we're doing this stuff is to educate people on the amazing things of this. That's why I love having you 2 on here. So don't, Nigel, I like you, buddy. But don't you ever come on here and tell me and talk to my co-hosts like that. I will not accept that. Never. I will knock your ass off, hands down, and I will not lose a goddamn minute of sleep. You will not talk bad about Jack Beers, who has been one of my co-hosts for well over a year, and you damn sure will not do it to Alyssa AVP, who has been very intellectual, very sharp, and has a lot of skills and knowledge. You ain't gonna do that on my channel. I don't fuck around with that shit. And I don't play games. So you know what? Fuck you. Get off my goddamn stream if you got a problem with us. You got something to say that is questionable? Put it questionable and ask. Don't you dare be insulting like that again. Because I will knock your ass off my stream faster than you can do. You know what? Fucking it. You know what? Fuck that. I blocked him. Fuck that. That's inappropriate. You guys are too good a host. You're too knowledgeable. You're too good people. I ain't gonna play that game with people. I don't do that shit. You don't go after my friends. Doesn't matter that I haven't met them personally. I know Jack very well. We have been good friends for a long time. I've met Alyssa a few months ago. She's a good person. They are what I consider my friends. You don't fuck with my friends. I don't play games like that. That ain't me. You go after my friends. You go after the people I'm having a conversation with and act like an asshole, I'm going to drop your ass like a bad goddamn habit. So, fuck you. Fuck off. Sorry, guys. But I don't like that shit. That is disrespectful. And you don't deserve that. Neither one of you do. I don't fucking play games with people. You know, most of these people on here don't understand who I am. I am one angry motherfucker, and when I am pissed, I will fucking lose it. And I don't just mean verbally. I'll fucking go after your ass. I'll sit there and fight you, and I don't care who goes to the hospital and who goes to jail. I'll take your ass out. If I lose, I lose. Don't you ever talk like that to people on my panel again. You gotta be out of your goddamn fucking mind. Asshole. Sorry.
Yeah. So, what I was trying to say is Hitchcock did technically have a favorite film. His favorite film was technically Shadow of a Doubt. I've actually seen that one. That was actually remade into, I think, the recent 1990s, 2000-ish. So, in case you guys didn't know, it's basically where it involved, the first time where it involved a serial killer, saying that a serial killer could be in your own family relations, going back to the horror film genre that we talked about earlier. So basically, Shadow of a Doubt basically is the one showing you that serial killers could be someone that you actually knew. So if you guys have never seen the film, I will just basically tell you this straight up, that basically this young girl named Charlie believes that her Uncle Charlie, she's like, oh, I love my Uncle Charlie. I love my Uncle Charlie. And the thing is, she finds out, no, her Uncle Charlie is actually not what he claims to be. He's actually out there killing these women, and he's on the run from the police kind of thing. And so, spoiler alert, I won't spoil it too much, but I'll just say she finds out that her uncle isn't what he seems to be, and she has to confront him, basically, so to speak. And it's typical Hitchcock. Who's going to win at the very end? Is Charlie going to win against Uncle Charlie? I won't spoil it for you guys, but basically it's typical.
No, please don't. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to have to definitely take a look at it.
But like I said,
that was the thing. Alyssa and Jack is one of the brilliance of Alfred Hitchcock, he knew how to. I mean, they call him the master of suspense for a reason.
Yes.
He really understood how to keep you on the edge of your seat.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a young boy watching, movies that were 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, I was on the edge of my seat. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock really knew how to do master horror. Okay, guys, I hate to do this to you, Alyssa. I know you probably have more,
Nope,
but like
that's
I
it.
said,
That's all I had. That's all I had
we,
actually.
we've hit an hour, and we need to definitely call it a day. Do you guys want to do more Alfred Hitchcock next week, or do you guys have a theme you want to go with next week?
We have a theme, but
Yeah,
it's
we pretty
Okay,
much went through
what's
the
the
whole
theme,
thing.
guys? Tell me.
so we have classic movies, which will fit into ones like, say, Dr. Zhivago and all that kind of stuff. Then we'll go into Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, war era movies, Disney, musicals, westerns, science fiction, including Forbidden Planet.
Hey, Max.
Oh, nice. Hey, Max. Sorry. Yeah, we're about to head up. We only do about an hour and 50 minutes, and like I said, I've been up since 8 o'clock yesterday morning, so I'm exhausted. Um, but yeah, definitely. Let me get with you guys the next few days, and we'll talk about what our next theme's going to be. I'll try to do more research and stuff, but we've got, there's so much history of film that is so there that I know we can do. So why don't you two collaborate and tell me, get with me, either Jack or Alyssa or both of you guys, get with me. We'll talk about what themes we want to go with for the next few months, because I really think we have a lot to go with. Um, all right. With that being said, Hitchcock. What does Darth Vader say? Hitchcock always usually built the biggest. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, folks. We are going to call it a day. I'm going to put my outro up. You all have a good one. You have a blessed one. And I will talk to you guys after we shut down the stream.